Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty, above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. That is a praise song. That is a song designed to make us and keep us proud of America and proud to be Americans. And pride in our nation is important, but not if it's based on a commercial, not if it's based on a sales pitch. I was talking to Dr. Doug Gillen, one of my colleagues in psychology. I was talking to him about how angry my students get while they do their assigned reading of Tim Tyson's Blood Done Sign My Name. No, my students are not angry about me giving this as an assignment. At least they don't tell me that. My students become angry while reading Tim Tyson's Blood Done Sign My Name because they ask, why did I have to wait to get to college to learn the real ugly truth about the civil rights movement in America? They become even angrier because they had to wait to get to college to learn even about North Carolina's racial history. Upon reading about the 1898 Wilmington race riot, during which white North Carolinians killed black North Carolinians and threw the dead in the Wilmington River, one student wrote, I am shocked to find out about the riots in Wilmington. Why have I never heard of such a thing while I live in North Carolina? Why has it been kept hush from North Carolina history? I am completely appalled. Doug and I were talking about what good teaching is supposed to do. We were agreeing that good teaching is about giving the learner true, factual information in a way that transforms the learner's understanding of the world. It was in that context that I was talking about my students' anger about not learning in high school the real history of race in America. When I said what I said about my students, Doug commented, well, he said, we all know that what is taught in middle and high school about American history isn't the history, it's a sales pitch. That hit me. What's it gonna take to get you into this America? The salesperson says. Then the salesperson gives our children a sales pitch. Trust me, I've got a deal for you. The salesperson offers a deal, all right, a false identity, no Carfax. It's a sales pitch. To tell you the truth, I had not thought of it that way. Maybe that's why I was so struck by Doug's comment. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. It's a sales pitch. Well, I'll be. No wonder so many Americans get so upset about learning the real truths about American history. Some Americans act as if showing patterns of past racial, gender, ethnic injustice is just too much. You're just being critical. America, love it or leave it. If you had bought the sales pitch, you don't want to have to rethink the purchase you have already made. Yet I say again, pride in our nation is important, but not if it's false pride based on a commercial, based on a sales pitch. Look, I am proud to be an American. I gave 4 years of my life to serve, protect, and defend America. But during the same time I was in the Navy, I also worked hard to help the Navy, to help America correct its racial mistakes. You see, I served in the Navy during a very difficult time for race relations in the military. Imagine this, race riots aboard ships carrying weapons of mass destruction. I don't have to imagine that horror. January 1973, on board the aircraft carrier USS Intrepid, carrying 5,000 men and many weapons of mass destruction. On that aircraft carrier, a race riot broke out that lasted 3 days in the Mediterranean, 3 days of on and off again, random attacks on white sailors, random attacks on black sailors, while at sea. What in the world? Well, the Navy needed to fix its mistakes in the way that black sailors were being treated in that time of racial transition. So an intervention was created that required all sailors, officers and enlisted to participate in racial sensitivity training that lasted 2.5 days. I was trained but to be one of the facilitators of those groups. I did so ashore and at sea. In those 2.5 day sessions, sailors, officers, and enlisted learned that they had to set aside their stereotypes and intolerant language in order to work with the real person in their work group. So, like I said, I am proud to be an American, but the only America I can be proud of is one that works to admit and correct its mistakes. As a nation, America has made mistakes. Still, I know the real beauty of America is that we can fight to correct our mistakes. That is not the case in every nation of the world. But in America, we can and we do fight through our mistakes. January 1, 2013, we celebrated the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, the proclamation that began to make slavery in America illegal. That proclamation was America correcting itself. There are many other examples. August 18, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution granted American women the right to vote. July 2nd, 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, outlawing major forms of discrimination against racial, ethnic, national, and religious minorities and women. July 26, 1990, Americans with Disabilities Act was enacted to prohibit discriminations based on disability. September 20th, 2011, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, meaning that gays, lesbians, and bisexuals can serve in the United States Armed Forces without having to hide their sexuality. It was about time we correct our mistakes. So what about now? What mistakes are we making right now? Right now that we can stop. We've got some difficult days ahead. That's what he said. He said, we've got some difficult days ahead. On that fateful night, when it seemed he knew he would be dead the next day, the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, we've got some difficult days ahead. On that fateful night, after so many battles had been won, he said, we've got some difficult days ahead. Understand that Dr. King always chose his words carefully. That's why I am convinced that on that night in Memphis, Tennessee, it was no accident that he said, we've got some difficult days ahead. But what? What was he thinking of? What was he alerting us to? What did he know? It was clear he knew somehow. He already knew. And what I believe Dr. King knew was that change is difficult. And I believe he knew too that the most difficult change of all still lay before America. Change in the way we interact with each other face to face. He was telling us to get ready. Get ready for what we live with today. Neodiversity. Neodiversity. We live in a time and a circumstance when we cannot avoid interacting with people who are members of different racial, ethnic, gender, religious, or sexually oriented groups. And what does that do to us? It can create neodiversity anxiety. It can have us running around with anxiety about who are the we and who among the they. If you have bought the sales pitch, you see, American identity is supposed to be pure. Pure in what way? Here's the third stanza of America the Beautiful. Oh, beautiful for a patriot dream that sees beyond the years, thine alabaster cities gleam undimmed by human tears, alabaster, white. But it turns out that was never America, and it certainly is not America today. Today we live with neodiversity, and now for the first time, it is nearly true that every American has a chance to raise their voice in song and protest. Can you say YouTube? That means that groups that have experienced injustice cannot be silenced. Today, we live in those difficult days when no one will stay in the kitchen. Not only do we live in an age of neodiversity, we live in an age when no one is hiding, no one is ashamed of whom they are, and no one wants to be melted. Hola, I am the darker brother, the lesbian sister, the Muslim sister and brother, the atheist brother and sister, the brown brother and sister, the Christian brother and sister, the gay brother, the Hindu, the Buddhist brother and sister. Et toi, c'est bon, laisse les bons temps rouler. Who that? I am your America. So now, we as a nation are being pushed to live up to the part of the lyric that says, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. But again, neodiversity can turn into an anxiety about who are the we and who are among the they. And that anxiety is living large in our everyday social interactions. At this point in our history, we seem to relish being able to call somebody a racist from a distance. Some politician, some celebrity, or some other simpleton says something racially awkward that goes viral, and we sit back and say, what a racist. But when someone uses a racial slur, a gender slur, an ethnic slur, a religious slur over dinner, a person sitting right next to us, we say nothing. A white female student of mine wrote in one of her papers, I have heard nigger, bitch, whitey, and multitudes of others. That is a young woman describing her 21st century neodiverse experiences. And it's not just one student who reports this, and it's not just students. On the issue of American neodiversity, I work with a lot of different age groups, middle school students to 80-year-olds. And in every one of those groups, someone brings up that problem. Someone says, when we get in our own demographic group, when it's just us, the language changes, and somebody there starts using anti-group slurs. Muslim Americans become sand niggers and ragheads. Women become sluts and whores. President Obama becomes, you get the idea. The person who brings this up says, I'm very uncomfortable when this happens, but I don't say anything. I don't want to be the odd one out. And so the sales pitch lives on, America, America. We let our neodiversity, anxiety, and uncertainties freeze us in a moment when we should speak up to call intolerant language offensive. We show too much tolerance for intolerance. In those moments, we should speak up and call out the offense. We should take action. And there is action to take. And that action is to speak up in the interpersonal moment. Here's the strategy. When someone you are interacting with uses anti-group language, when someone you are interacting with speaks about a person as a stereotype, stop the interaction. Put your hand up and then quietly say, oh, I'm sorry. I'm very uncomfortable with that language. I find it offensive. It hurts me. That's it. That's all you have to do. That's taking action. That is interpersonal action appropriate to the interpersonal moment. And it will work. I know this because it's not my opinion, but because the data from social psychological experiments demonstrate that it works. Now let's be clear. I offer this because people who bring this up, who bring up this interpersonal problem, they say they are uncomfortable when someone uses slurs about any group, gays and lesbians, Mexican Americans and the like. So that tells me that you want it to stop. Now you have a strategy. One set of students has become very serious about using this strategy to combat intolerant language at North Carolina State University. I am faculty advisor to that student group whose mission is to teach other students how to use the strategy to take action against intolerant language. The group is Wake Up, It's Serious, a campaign for change. Those young people have decided to stop sitting around waiting on the world to change. Look, America is now a neodiverse nation, and we ain't going back. But some of our fellow citizens are being controlled by their neodiversity anxieties. We saw that anxiety just before the November 2012 presidential election. Let's put the white back in the White House. We saw it with the re-election of President Barack Hussein Obama, when some Americans said, we have to secede from the nation, it's not America anymore. That's where you end up if you have bought the sales pitch. That's where you end up without the Carfax. So all of us have to pay attention and not let ourselves be misled by our own or other people's neodiversity anxiety. That's true in whatever context Americans work. We have to get past the superficial and deal with each other as equals. And we have to stand up for the beautiful changes and corrections that have come to America. If we keep waiting on the world to change, if we stand silent in the everyday face of offensive anti-group language, we help old wounds fester and we create new national wounds. That is what Martin Luther King Jr. was telling us about being silent. He said, the greatest tragedy of this age will not be the vitriolic words and deeds of the children of darkness, but the appalling silence of the children of light. Must everyone in America like each other? No, that's a ridiculous idea. But to be an American citizen means to respect other citizens. Let's work past the sales pitch and intolerant language. Let's start being true to each other as Americans by working to find and correct our mistakes. Otherwise, all we do is keep saying everything is all right. We stand and sing America the Beautiful with our eyes closed. The poet W.H. Auden wrote, evil is unspectacular and always human and shares our bed and eats at our own table. It is not the case that everybody else is a racist. The truth is that we all know the language of group hate. We must know it because we certainly recognize it when someone else gets caught using that language. When that happens, we say, what a racist. But the Carfax sing a different lyric. We all know the language of group hate. We are in trouble as a nation when citizens just stand with their eyes closed and sing America the Beautiful. The truth is, we have to work to make that praise song meaningful, and we can take interpersonal action to do so. We should take interpersonal action in those everyday social interaction moments when the offensive, intolerant language is used, the offensive, intolerant language of our past and ongoing mistakes. It is our obligation to our nation to speak up and say quietly but firmly, oh, I am sorry. I am very uncomfortable with that kind of language. I find it offensive. It hurts me. Martin Luther King Jr. will tell us that it's time to take a close look at the sales pitch. In fact, it's time to give the sales pitch real context by learning and admitting our real history. So remember, in the words of Dr. King, we've got some difficult days ahead, but that's all right because we are Americans who have the opportunity to do better. That's why the quote that Dr. King used so often still applies to our neodiverse nation. Today, Dr. King would use that quote to remind us both of the mistakes we have made and the positive work we Americans have done and continue to do to become true to the American dream. What quote is that? Oh, it's a quote of an abolitionist who said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. America, America,